But like, if let's say I had $1 million to DCA today, like how would I do it? I'd pretty much just be focusing on PHEX and Pulse because they're for sure bets, and I know that that million can turn into 10 million.
And I want to transition kind of to, so you were just mentioning PulseX, some of the mechanics of PulseX, obviously the buy and burn, how we've already had 2% of the user base burn and where we could be with that in just a few years. You had, and some of my notes are from like a week ago, so I'm trying to remember where this is from, but you had a comment, I think you might have been on with Corey Costa or tweeted at him, or I forget what it was, but about PulseX being down, just kind of being a math equation, which I think was kind of a good cold-blooded way of looking at it. You know, people, we got PulseX down like 90%. We, like you mentioned, we've got that ratio at 4-1 basically right now between Pulse and PulseX. But everybody's talking about the terrible performance of PulseX so far. And let's face it, I mean, like the whole ecosystem, I mean, you could say that about looking at the charts. But I think with PulseX particularly, it has been one of the worst performers. And so many people chose to really pump it up prior to the PulseChain launch because, let's face it, more people had PulseX. There was more money in PulseX.
Bro, I love this. This is juicy.
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this because, I mean, is it just as simple as that's how many more people had the token? That's how many more people had – that's how much more money was in it. That's why we're seeing it reflected in the price. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yep, more people held it by a factor of, I think, 3 more. So for every 1 Pulse holder, there was 3 PulseX holders. Mm-hmm. And like, where's the utility short term? You don't have to own PulseX to be benefiting from the buy and burn. Mm-hmm. You don't need it for single-sided staking. You know, PulseX and PulseChain were overperforming. Like, it's just and the reason why was because everyone had the one thing and everyone needed the other things or wanted to chase gains somewhere else. And so it just got treated like the redheaded stepchild now. There's just too much supply and too many people were banking on, they missed the PulseChain sacrifice and they're holding this PulseX, right? And they think, oh, this thing's gonna, everyone created a narrative before the thing launched, like looking for these insane returns, but that was the least desired asset out of everything. Even ink was more desired, I think, because it was really scarce right away, right?
Yeah.
And so I think looking at it now, it's like, okay, well, now all that, like, if you sacrifice for PulseX or Pulse, pick either one, and you got that 2.5x multiplier bonus, and if you were selling it at the top, it didn't matter which one, taking profits, I mean, you were realizing gains in hex terms of like $1 to $1.50, and in some cases even $2 per hex in terms of if you sacrifice at the peaks, so that would be 17.2 cent hex during the PulseChain sacrifice multiplied by 2.5x, it's like over 40 cents, right? Wow. And then the price appreciates 475% off the sacrifice rate that you got, and then you do the math, like you're looking at $1.60 hex that you sold virtually by selling the Pulse you got from the sacrifice. Same thing for PulseX. Had you sacrificed at 34, 35, 36 cents and had a similar equation, you were looking at realizing over $1 per hex. And so like people made a shitload of money.
Yeah.
On that sacrifice phase, on the launch phase, after that run up, after that 150 million was coming in over the bridge, and then that listing on OKX, which was like the nail in the coffin, right? Because every time a centralized exchange lists, you know that they want everyone to deposit their funds on their exchange so they can get exposure by letting the price drop 90% and then buying it all up off everybody. But it was just kind of a turn of events that they delisted it. Was that intentional or not? I don't know. Will they relist it? But perhaps, I don't know. It's just interesting that, that stuff all happened after the fact, but the writing was on the wall when the bridge uncleared and we peaked, right? So there was a lot of people in both camps, Pulse and PulseX, that made a lot of money. And that's not even including the ink that people were farming. People were making, like big sackers were making like over $20,000 a day in ink rewards at some point in there, maybe even more. So it's, and you look at the bridge and you look at, this is kind of like veering now off of just PulseX and just looking at the ecosystem as a whole. When you look at the bridge, there's been like 680, or I'm pulling this off the top of my head. It's over $600 million put into the bridge and like 450 million pulled off the bridge. You ended up with like something like $150 million is still bridged in. And that's stayed pretty stable now for a while, but crazy to think about the change of hands and like how much money was actually traded.
Yeah,
Well,
and
real quick,
that.
I have a
Go ahead, go ahead.
I have a question about your thoughts on this. You know, we've held the 3-to-1 ratio pretty well with Pulse versus PulseX. What do you think the ratio of people being 3-to-1? Do you totally correlate that to it completely?
Yep. I think so. I think it's
Okay.
just simple math. I think in addition to that, so the reason why you will think of what's the middle number in 2 and 4, it's 3. Well, if 3 is a straight line across your screen, it's just oscillating up and down in a ratio as they both rise together. Well, right now they're falling together, but
Yeah.
as they rise and fall together, they're going to oscillate around that 3-to-1 ratio until the redistribution phase is done, and everyone who wants what they want is settled, and a lot of the PulseX and Inc is going to get consolidated into a few wallets that is going to be like the masterminds behind the next few cycles.
Okay. Yeah, I thought so too, and I wondered how that would change over time as a lot of these big wallets, as you see, have dumped. I wondered if that ratio would change as things even out, or is it going to stay, do you think, pretty static along the way?
Well, so when it'll change because, like I was saying before, if you look at it on a 10-year timeline, eventually so much PulseX gets burned at a faster rate than anything else that it causes a supply squeeze. And it'll just start creating green candles, and then it could go into a parabolic move all on its own. So it would change the ratio. But you're looking at 5 to 10 year
Right,
time frame.
long term.
Short term, I would say we're not going to go out of these ranges. I don't think any you go lower than 4-to-1, and I mean a lot of people are going to take advantage of that opportunity and just look for a flip from 5-to-1 back to 4-to-1. Because it's just an easy 20%. So
Sure.
When you're dealing with like big players like sharks and whales, like they want those 20% moves if it's a shoe in like that, and they can have some sort of say in where the market is driven.
That kind of leads me to the question of, so let's just pick your average investor in this ecosystem right now, which I'm making some assumptions here, but let's just assume for easiness sake of this question, if they are equally invested in PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex on both chains. So we'll just say that 33% in each, and then their hexes are just split right down the middle. If that is you just kind of seeing the state of things right now, and I get really intrigued by this PulseX angle of things because it's, again, that redheaded stepchild, like you said, that everybody loves to hate right now. Mm-hmm. How would you be like looking to, not financial advice, just your choice? How would you be interested at that point in investing into the ecosystem? I mean, would you just be plopping down, a third into everything, or would you be heavily leaning towards PulseX like you kind of alluded to, I think, with this 4-to-1 ratio now? How would you look at a DCA?
I don't think many people's going to like my answer because it's selfish. But like, if let's say I had $1 million to DCA today, like how would I do it? I'd pretty much just be focusing on PHEX and Pulse because they're for sure bets. And I know that million can turn into 10 million. But because that's the safe trade, you can go ahead and put 50 grand or 100 grand into Inc and PulseX and split it up 50-50. And if they overperform, then it really helps the portfolio. So like you take a small weighted percentage and you put them into those if you want to take on risk. Now, if you were to like take the million and split it up evenly across everything, to me, it doesn't make as much sense because you want to take the best horse, the blue chip. And the blue chip in my mind, which is PHEX, and then in second place is Pulse. But I feel like those two are going to have an interesting relationship this cycle where they'll take turns overperforming each other potentially. And so inside of there, I think there's going to be moments where if those two are trending up together, PulseX and Inc. They're in the cycle at some point. This is the opportunity cost of not knowing when it's going to happen, but that you could see these huge fucking candles print on PulseX, which is just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Because you could see this consolidation that happens over 18 months, and then in like 1 week, you're up like 1,000% or 2,000%, and like everyone that missed the boat and was playing safe got wrecked. Like they missed out, and that's how you leave people behind in these markets, right? And so just the more it's unfavorable, the better opportunity it is, because they're all going to be around. And if on a longer time frame, I think we've laid out enough now that Inc. and PulseX have a place on a longer time frame.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think also with PulseX, you know, just buy and burn mechanism, you know, it does make sense that as volume picks up and we get deeper into the cycle, that you could see that from it and just see some aggressive upside, I think.